This podcast is brought to you by the Islamic Center and NYU. For more information, visit our website at www.icnyu.org.
Bismillah. In going over the lives of the messengers and the prophets of Allah, of course, for us, this is a matter of our aqidah, that it's a matter of our creed. It's a matter of course, it's connected to our belief in Allah Azza wa Jal, as it is necessary and thought obligatory upon the Muslim, of course, to also believe in Allah's prophets. And of course, the message by which they were sent. And so when we look at any message of a prophet, it can be divided into certain categories. The first one, of course, is what they teach. So when we, in this matter of aqidah, in this matter of creed and belief for the believer, it becomes incumbent upon us that when we hear the message, of course, about the Anbiya, when we hear the message and that is connected specifically to Allah's prophets, to his messengers, there are a number of aspects that come into play. Number one, we believe what they tell us about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Of course, and as it relates to the definitions and the details of what it means to believe in Tawheed, what it means to understand who our Lord is. This is the first aspect. The next thing is that when it comes to matters of Rusul, those who are messengers, and just want to specify this particular aspect is that there are some prophets, right? Every messenger is a prophet, but every prophet was not a messenger. That every messenger, of course, is directly receiving revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is directly receiving risala. But in addition to that risala, they're also receiving law, right? That they're coming with a new law. And so this is different from prophets because prophets are upon the law of either if there is a messenger that is alive during their lifetime, then they are upon the law of that messenger who is alive. And if not, they are upon the law of the messenger before them. So a perfect example would be in the case of Harun wa Musa alayhi salam. So they are alive at the same time. Right? Harun is from the Anbiya. He is a prophet of Allah. Yet he receives revelation. Yet it is Musa who is the messenger. It is Musa alayhi salam who comes with the Torah, who comes with the law for the people. Therefore, Harun follows the law of Musa alayhi salam. Right? So even in the case of Ieasha and Yahya, that Yahya is a prophet, yet Ieasha alayhi salam is a messenger. So therefore, Prophet Yahya alayhi salam follows the law that Prophet Ieasha has laid out. Okay. And so understanding this, of course, is a matter of for us that we accept the revelation that's been given. But we also, in the case where law has been given, fiqh, jurisprudence, the law comes in multitude of aspects. The law comes as a governor over the self. So in terms of certain aspects of thinking, certain aspects of physicality, right? Like certain things I'm allowed to do physically and certain things I'm not allowed to do physically. I'm not allowed within Deen of Islam, within Deen al-Haq. It is not permissible physically to drink alcohol, right? That this, if I were to do something, to drink alcohol and I wasn't in starving state, and it would be a sin against the Sharia. It would be a sin against the law of Allah, right? That is a governance that in acceptance, in that submission, in saying, La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, in saying that Muhammad sallallahu alayhi is my messenger, then what I'm saying is, he's my prophet and my messenger, then what I'm saying is that the law that Allah has given him, I accept it and I submit to it as a law and a means for the governance over my life. Right? Not just in matters of, for example, someone could say, I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious. Right? Absolutely not. That for the Muslim, we understand that we submit Allah Azza wa Jal created us mind, body, and soul. right? And therefore, submission, right, is required mind, body, and soul. And there are laws of governance over the mind, the body, and the soul, right? So even like in terms of someone can say, well, you know, let me give out greed, for example. Greed is not a physical thing, yet it is not something, right, that is considered a lawful quality. It is actually considered a blameworthy quality. And therefore, it would be something that I would need to govern. And then there would be rules that are put in place for how I'm going to govern that. I'm going to practice fasting. I'm going to increase my charity. There are things that I would do in order to make sure that my soul then comes in alliance with that. Now, of course, obviously, it's a lot easier to obey the laws physically than they are to obey laws of the mind or laws of the heart or laws of the soul. Yet, as Allah Azza wa Jal created the human being, mind, body, and soul, there are also laws of governance for mind, body, and soul. And then there are levels, of course, of submission, mind, body, and soul. Right? And so, an understanding that the role and the position of the prophets and the messengers are for us to know, how do I find myself? Because what does it mean ultimately to be in submission to Allah? It means that I would attain a level of peace, right? That would not be attained had I not been in submission to Allah. Then I would attain ultimately that true salama, that true sakina, that which comes from what Islam means, right? Which means to obtain peace through the submission to the will of Allah Azza wa Jal. And so in looking at understanding, as we learn the religion and the spiritual practice, both of them, that we are both spiritual and religious people, because in order for the spirit to truly grow, in order for the spirit to truly ascend, in order for the spirit, for the ruh, right, that which is connected to Allah Azza wa Jal, to attain its true purpose with all of its greatness, then there must be a submission, right, of the other aspects of the human being. Therefore, if the body, where there are physical breaches, right, there are spiritual consequences. So, I mean, this is not difficult. So for where someone, for example, experiences, if they were to drink alcohol and that were to become, of course, an ongoing habit, right? This is going to affect the spirit. Absolutely, it's going to affect the spirit, especially if it leads to the harm that usually alcohol would. It's going to affect the spirit. To think otherwise would be lying to oneself. There are other aspects that if I engage in them, if I allow, for example, my lust, my desire, my shahwa to go unchecked by Allah Azza wa Jal, there are going to be spiritual ramifications of that. Of course, there are going to be effects upon my heart. There are going to be effects upon my relationship with Al-Qudus, the one who is the source of all holiness. Where there are physical breaches, there are spiritual consequences. And where there are spiritual breaches, right, there are physical consequences. So, of course, if I allow my spiritual lust to run wild, that's going to eventually, obviously, affect me physically. That's going to cause me to get into some physical situations that can be a means of great harm, not only to myself, but also to other people. And so when we look at what are the objectives and the aims of Islamic law, right, which is the preservation of life, this one is huge. The preservation of life, that humanity would continue, that life would continue, that life and until the day of judgment, bi'idhnillah, must continue. This is the aspect, right? So Islam comes to preserve life from a proactive standpoint and from a reactive standpoint. So there are going to be laws that govern how life must continue, and something that is a harm to life, such as murder, or such as highway robbery, such as, a number of things that will be a harm to life, there are going to be law. There's going to have law that govern that. If someone has murderous thoughts, they are not allowed, obviously, to act upon that. There are things that are spiritually put into place for someone to be able to address those particular thoughts, visions, so forth and so forth. Like that. So the preservation of life, the preservation of intellect, the preservation of one's mind, right? The preservation of deen and religion for the free practice of religion, the preservation of wealth and property, and the preservation of lineage, that one would be able to know, who am I? Where do I come from? Who may I inherit from? What are the lessons of the land that I'm supposed to know, right? And of course, as it relates to wealth and property, that someone doesn't have the right to steal or take from me that which I've worked so hard for. And so again, understanding that these ultimately are the aims and objectives of law. But ultimately, when we look at prophets and rusul, when we look at anbiya and messengers, prophets and messengers, it's about, how do I find my soul, my spirit, my mind, and body in alignment with the creator of the entire universe, in alignment with the one who created me, so that I may experience true happiness, that I might experience true peace, that I may no longer feel the wrestles inside of the soul, or the chaos that exists oftentimes within the mind, or even sickness in the body as it relates to the spiritual breaches in the contract between the human, right, and his or her Lord. And so with that being said, alhamdulillah, that's just kind of building off what we had mentioned in our last class together, and understanding why is even studying the prophets of Allah Azza wa Jal and the messengers a part of our creed. That it's not just a matter of tales of the ancient, it's not just a matter of telling bedtime stories, but it's a matter of understanding where are we personally in our lives, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given a framework for faith, and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has laid a pathway for which we are able to reach him, and that we're able to reach our highest potential, mind, body, and soul and spirit. Subhanallah. So with that being said, we ended, I mentioned the time before that we had ended with Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, and then we talked about Ismail and Ishaq. And so going on, there is another young man who also grows up in the company of Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam. He is his nephew. And his nephew actually is Prophet Lut alayhi salam. And Prophet Lut is known to have traveled and attached himself because of his love for Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam. He was one of the few believers who actually believed in Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, even while he was much younger. And so when Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam grew up and began to migrate for the purpose of giving dawah, for the purpose of spreading the message of La ilaha illallah, and calling people back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and also spreading, because Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam is also a messenger. So he came with Allah, right? As mentioned in Surah Al-A'la, Suhuf Ibrahim wa Musa. So this suhuf, right, or what we consider the scrolls of Prophet Ibrahim, came with law. He came with a specific do's and don'ts, commandments, a list of agreements, right, between the creation and the creator, that for those who made the commitment to say, Allah, you are my Lord, and I take the commitment towards happiness and sakina and peace in this life and in the hereafter, that these are the set of rules that I'm going to govern my life by. And so Prophet Lut alayhi salam actually was not from the Rusul. He was not from the messengers, but he was a prophet, right? And so growing up under Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, he learned from him. He traveled with him from Palestine into Syria. He traveled with him throughout these regions, and he was with him while he was giving dawah and while he was teaching to these groups of people. Subhanallah, literally like, an apprentice, like a prophet apprentice, subhanallah. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed to Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam that Prophet Lut would be a prophet and that he would be sent to a specific nation, and that he was sent to the nation of Sodom. And Sodom is actually on the edge of the area of the Dead Sea. I think, inshallah, on earth there are signs for those whose faith is certain, and also in yourselves will you not then see. Subhanallah, in this one, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is the region I wanted you to see. In this region, in the Judean desert, on the edge, right? This is considered the Dead Sea. I'm not sure if you can see my cursor. And then in this region, it's considered the land of Sodom, subhanallah. And so Prophet Lut alayhi salam was sent to this group of people. And subhanallah, what was known about the area that Prophet Lut, subhanallah, was sent to is that it was similar to like what Prophet Yunus, was sent to, is that they were the corrupt city, right? They were known for their level of corruption, for their level of criminality, right? That they were known for their level of criminality and their harshness in their criminality. One of the things that they would be known for is that if people tried to come into their land, if people tried to enter into their city, that they were known as robberies, right? That they would commit armed robbery. And inside of that armed robbery, it was also known that murder was a common thing, right? That murder and killing people for their goods, for themselves, for the sake of even just showing off their strength was known from the people of Sodom. That this was something that they kind of reveled in. They reveled in this level of criminality. They reveled in their level of theft. And this theft would happen in a multitude of ways. Again, whether it happened from I'm stealing one's goods, or I'm stealing the people, or I'm stealing their bodies. And we're going to go into that in a little bit more detail, inshallah, in just a moment. And so people would try to come to Sodom because it was such a bustling area. They would try to actually, see if they could stomach it, if they could, if they would be lucky enough to trade with the people. And so many travelers, merchants, and business people would actually come to this region for trade, right? But again, because of its high criminality, it's kind of like, there are places even inside of America or across the world that people like to come to, even though they're being told that you could get robbed, you could get mugged, you could get stabbed, you could be seriously hurt, but people still were interested in, saying, I still want to go, right? Like I still want to be a part of, whatever it is they have going on. And so this was the case for the people of Sodom. And so subhanAllah, what's known is that Allah Azza wa Jal actually sent Lut to this group of people. And Ibrahim alayhi salam spoke to him and said, this is the tough region. Allah Azza wa Jal has given you a difficult assignment, but you have to remain steadfast and resolute. And so it's known that when he took this assignment, that he took it with a level of strength and a level of courage and a level of steadfastness. Now, when he went to Sodom, it says that he taught in this region for years, and not one person followed. Not one, that he did not have one follower, not one person who was willing to listen to him. And he was known, subhanAllah, that he actually used to taunt him and say, now listen, you're coming here and giving this message, calling us to worship Allah, right? But listen, we can believe in Allah, but we don't need to follow your rules. Right? Like, I'm willing to this different, if we look at different than the case of Prophet Ibrahim, right? Or even the case of Prophet Noah before him. This is not an external ideology, idolatry. That's what I'm trying to say. This is not an external idolatry. This is not a matter of people saying, I worship physical stones or statues or things like that. They're saying that's fine. Right? Believe in one God, right? You can worship one God, that's fine. But in terms of your rules that are connected to that, no. In terms of there being a religiosity that is connected to this spirituality, no. We make up the rules. We decide exactly how we want to govern our lives. So ultimately, their biggest sin. So we would say, okay, well, if it's not external idolatry, it's the idolatry of the self. Because ultimately, whoever determines right and wrong for you, and that you're saying, I'm willing to submit myself to the laws of righteousness according to whoever, that's who you worship. It is that, and whoever is the perpetrator of that particular knowledge, whoever is the one who is peddling that particular message, giving you the definitions of this is right, this is wrong, this is the methodology, this is how I should live my life. Whoever is setting the criteria, the furqan, the bayat, whoever is setting that for you, that's who you worship. And so in this case, when it came to the people that Lut alayhi salam were assigned to, when it came to the people of Sodom, ultimately they worshiped their own desire. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about that. Have you seen the one who takes his desires for his Lord? What does that mean? Right? What does it mean for the one to say, I take my desires for my Lord? It means that I'm the one who determines, right? If this is the way I feel about it, that's the way it's going to be. That it's not a question of whether or not Allah exists. It's not a question of whether or not I believe in Allah. It's a question of whether or not I will allow Allah to govern my life. Will I take the laws of Allah to govern my mind, my body, and my soul? That is the issue here with the people of Lut, subhanAllah. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned the story of Prophet Lut, even though it may seem as if, that he's not of the major prophets, right? We might even consider, this is a tiny little place, in a region that's not, if we were to look at the greatness of the world in terms of like Jerusalem, Palestine, if we were to look at Syria, Shem, or even all of Arabia, or even, of course, all the things that are happening inside of Africa, and even inside of Europe at the time, what's happening in Persia, this is considered a small place, right? It's not a huge land. Yet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned Prophet Lut over 17 times in the Quran. Over 17 times, subhanAllah, inside the Quran, Prophet Lut is mentioned. He's mentioned in Ankabut. And I always find it so interesting, subhanAllah, that the surahs that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would mention certain prophets in, like the title of it, just thinking about in this, in the spider web, that how one can be caught inside of something, that it's so easy to enter, but it's not as easy, right? If you've ever been caught in a spider web, it's so tiny, you don't necessarily see it coming, but then trying to get it off your face or on your hand, when you find it, you're like, where is it, right? And so, subhanAllah, in looking at the story of Prophet Lut alayhi salam, that he's mentioned over 17 times. And Allah Azza wa Jal also mentions him in Anbiya, in Surah Al-Anbiya. in the stories of the prophets, which we actually went through when we were studying Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam. He's then mentioned after Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam. And so, bismillah, just
وَلُوطًا آتَيْنَاهُ حُكْمًا وَعِلْمًا وَنَجَّيْنَاهُ مِنَ الْقَرْيَةِ الَّتِي كَانَتْ تَعْمَلُ الْخَبَائِثَ إِنَّهُمْ كَانُوا قَوْمَ سَوْءٍ فَاسِقِينَ وَأَدْخَلْنَاهُ فِي رَحْمَتِنَا إِنَّهُ مِنَ الصَّالِحِينَ.
Allah says, as for Lut, we gave him wisdom and knowledge, and we delivered him from the town that used to do dirty deeds, criminal deeds. Indeed, they were the people of evil, the sinners. And we admitted him to our mercy. Indeed, he was of the righteous. And then, subhanAllah, Prophet Lut is mentioned again. And Allahumma salli ala habibina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. He's mentioned again and some of the other ayats in the Quran as it even relates to other prophets. And so I go back to this, going back to the story, subhanAllah, specifically of Prophet Lut, is that, you know, after Allah says, we gave him knowledge and wisdom. What I love about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying that he gave Lut wisdom is that Lut was not a backwards man. Lut was not a man who didn't understand the people. He wasn't a person who was so religious in his thinking. He wasn't so spiritually high that he was no earthly good. That Lut was not a person, alayhi salam. He was not a person who was kind of absent from being in a position of understanding. He wasn't uneducated, as many times is often presented of religious people of certain religious views, that if they hold this view, they must be uneducated. They must lack wisdom. They must lack understanding of the people. They must lack understanding into the inside of people. But subhanAllah, as we mentioned before, in understanding the nature of prophets, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them sagacity, that they come with a high level of wisdom. They, in order to deliver the message, in order to deliver the risala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed them with an insight into the hearts of people. Right? And so this is not a man who's untrained. This is a man that, subhanAllah, has lived with Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam for years. He's seen how people would attack him for this message, for calling people to Allah subhanahu. He's seen what people are capable of, that they will throw you in a fire, that they will burn you alive. He's seen that when you try to take away somebody's idols, that they would become unglued and begin to attack you. So he comes with a knowledge and a wisdom and a high level of experience, right? A high level of experience. And so, subhanAllah, that Allah Azza wa Jalla describes him in this way is something so beautiful, right? That Allah says, we gave him wisdom, we gave him knowledge, right? But subhanAllah, because of that wisdom and that knowledge, we delivered him to these people saying he's capable, right? He's capable of delivering this message. Allah does not put you in a circumstance that you would not be able to handle. And so, subhanAllah, going back to the story of Prophet Lut, when he gets there, okay, bismillah, inshallah, I'll go as speedy as I can so that to make sure that you pray Salatul Maghrib, inshallah, on time. And again, we'll start again next week at 7 o'clock so that we'll go back to our adhkar from Maghrib, inshallah. So forgive me for the speed version. He is, meanwhile, while he's in the midst of teaching in Sodom, Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam is visited by three beautiful men. And these three beautiful men that come visit Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam is so honored by these guests. And so he orders for there to be a sheep that's slaughtered so that he could serve his guests well. And when he goes to serve these guests, he notices that they don't eat. And when the guests don't eat, Ibrahim and immediately, alayhi salam, has haiba. He immediately feels something, right, is different about his guests, right? And so when the three men who are present realize the state of Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, they tell him, don't fear, la takhaf, right? La takhaf, meaning they say, don't fear, right? And then they say, we are angels, we are malaika. And one of them is Jibreel alayhi salam, traveling with two other angels, and say that we have been sent for the people of Lut. They're telling, subhanAllah, as if they're telling the uncle, right? The one who prepared him, like, we're telling you now, right? That we are on our way to the people of Lut. And so, subhanAllah, Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam mentions to them, right? Like, he says, we're on our way to Sodom. And then Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, he immediately mentions, like, my nephew is there, right? Like, please, I know what you're coming for. And I know that you've given them time. And I guess you're telling them time is up. And so the angels say, we know very well who's in that city. Right? And we shall save him. Then they give him a surety, we shall save him except his wife. Subhanallah. And you can find more of the detailed story. Inshallah, I wanted to see if I could pull that up for you really quickly. In Surah and Ankabut, in Ankabut, subhanallah, where he says, when it becomes clear, right? When Ibrahim, here goes. And when our messengers came to Ibrahim with the good news, they said, we're going to destroy the people of this town. Surely its people have been transgressors. He said, there is Lut in it. They said, we know well who is in it. We will certainly save him and his family, except his wife, who will be among those remaining behind. And when our messengers came to Lut, he grieved for them. This is so key. He grieved for them and his heart was straitened because of them. But they said, we're going to save you and your family, except your wife, who will be from those who are remaining behind. I want us to understand something about Prophet Lut, because subhanAllah, when these angels who came in the form of men entered into his city, his daughters were righteous women. And they saw the beautiful men entering into the city. And what was known is that the type of men that existed inside of Sodom were known for their rape and known for their, what is called Sodom, for their sodomy of men they don't know them. Right? They don't know them at all. And so even when his daughters see, they say, oh my God, these men they look young, they look handsome. They worried for them. Like, you can't walk through the streets of Sodom like that, right? Like, it's known that some kind of criminal act will happen to you. And so subhanAllah, they run and tell their father, I've seen some men coming into the city. We got to help them. And so Lut alayhi salam immediately says, their guests, let's protect them. And so he brings them to their home. But subhanAllah, as they're in their home and he tries to entertain them, and then it becomes known who they are, there is a mob outside of Lut's home. And they are yelling and screaming and banging on the door. They are beating down the door, saying to Prophet Lut alayhi salam, bring us your guests. If you don't give them to us, we're coming in to get them. Can you imagine? Can you imagine this type of mob outside that they are demanding, right? As if they have rights to the bodies of these men. They are demanding. And so subhanAllah, in this moment, Lut makes dua, like, Ya Allah, save me, right? Save me from the people who are evildoers. And the men say, Ya Lut, don't worry. We're malaika. We came to protect you and your family, right? And so they will never enter into your home. Don't worry. Right? And so subhanAllah, one of them goes outside, Angel Jibreel alayhi salam goes outside, and it said that there was either a wind or an action that he did that caused all of them to go blind. And then they began to blame Prophet Lut alayhi salam and said, what is this magic that your guests have done? What is this that they've done? And they all began to scatter away as they immediately lost their sight. Subhanallah. And then the angels, these three men said, listen, we've been sent to destroy this town. You and your family leave, right? You and your family get out before dawn. And so, subhanAllah, Prophet Lut and his righteous daughters, and he tried to take his wife to try to teach her and to help her and to save her. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, he grieved over these people. There wasn't a hatred. There wasn't a wishing for their damnation. There wasn't a wishing that Allah would destroy. There was a deep sense of grief. Like, I really wanted you to have that eternal peace and that eternal happiness. Right? And so, subhanAllah, but as Allah commanded, he would leave with his daughters, but his wife had an affinity toward them. That, as a matter of fact, I didn't mention, it was actually his wife who alerted the mob of the guests in the home. Now, what is the significance of the wife? It's a matter of sometimes just because you're a righteous person, just because you're seeking Allah and his way, doesn't necessarily mean that everyone in your family will. Just because you believe a certain way and you practice a certain way, and just because sometimes you pray and cry to Allah for some members of your family, it doesn't necessarily mean that they will all be guided aright. That they have their own journey and their own account with Allah based upon their willingness to submit mind, body, and soul, based upon their willingness to regulate themselves and govern themselves according to Allah and his messengers. And so, subhanAllah, Prophet Lut alayhi salam and his family were saved. But the angel Jibreel, as well as the two other angels, literally sent a loud sound that then caused an earthquake of tumultuous proportions inside of this land. It said that angel Jibreel picked it up with his wing, twisted it, and slammed it on the ground with his people. And that was the end of the people of Sodom. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت ونستغفرك ونتوب إليك. جزاكم الله خير. Forgive me that I will end quickly tonight. We won't have time for Q&A. Please write me at ip34@nyu.edu if you have any questions. But I want you, as you can hear, that is the Iqama for Salat al-Maghrib, bi'idhnillah. And inshallah, bi'idhnillah, we will also be able to pray on time. Please remember, next week, inshallah, we'll start from 7 and go from then, and then we'll have time for our adhkar. Jazakumullah khair. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us amongst those who are firm and steadfast in deen. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us amongst those who obey him mind, body, and soul. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala attach our hearts to all that he loves and disconnect us from that which displeases him. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
If you would like to listen to more, please donate to www.icnyu.org/donate. For more of our virtual programs, go to www.icnyu.org/classes. If you have any questions, email us at info@icnyu.org.